Welcome back to our channel for another deep dive into the relentlessly dramatic world of Genoa City. Today is a magnificent day to explore the shifting power dynamics, the fragile romances, and the explosive corporate battles that keep us all captivated. The landscape of legacy and loyalty is about to be violently altered, so let us step directly into the heart of the latest storm brewing at Chancellor Industries. The atmosphere within the opulent confines of the executive suite was thick with an intoxicating blend of romantic nostalgia and unspoken apprehension as Lily Winters and Kane Ashby found themselves drifting into a familiar, highly charged rhythm. For a fleeting moment, the heavy burdens of corporate warfare and the bitter sting of past betrayals seemed to evaporate, replaced by the undeniable, magnetic chemistry that had always defined their connection. The subtle glances, the lingering proximity, and the soft cadence of their voices painted a picture of two people desperately yearning to reclaim a fractured love. Lily allowed the rigid tension in her shoulders to soften under Kane's attentive gaze. It was a rare, vulnerable interlude, a delicate dance of flirtation that hinted at the possibility of a genuine reconciliation, a momentary sanctuary from the relentless chaos that constantly threatened to consume their lives. However, such moments of tranquil intimacy are notoriously short-lived, and the fragile peace between Lily and Kane was swiftly infiltrated by a dark, familiar shadow. The romantic energy in the room began to curdle as the conversation inevitably drifted toward the one subject capable of instantly extinguishing their warmth, Billy Abbott. Lily's demeanor shifted with jarring abruptness, her softening gaze hardening into a glare of profound exasperation. The mere mention of Billy's name was enough to trigger a cascade of anxiety within her. As the newly minted steward of a massive corporate legacy, Lily felt the crushing weight of responsibility pressing down upon her, and she viewed Billy not as an asset, but as a ticking time bomb nestled directly at the foundation of Chancellor Industries. Lily articulated her mounting dread with razor-sharp precision, her voice losing all traces of its earlier softness. She expressed a deep, resonant frustration over Billy's escalating, manic obsession with unearthing whatever dark secrets Jill Abbott had buried within the company's archives. To Lily, Billy's relentless crusade was not a noble pursuit of truth, but a toxic manifestation of his chronic inability to leave well enough alone. She detailed the chaotic ripples his investigation was already causing, and the sheer risk of allowing a man with his history of reckless impulsivity to roam unchecked. Her protective instincts, honed by the legacy of her late father, flared to life, demanding immediate and decisive action to neutralize the threat. Driven by this fierce need to protect her empire, Lily reached a chillingly pragmatic conclusion, firmly declaring her intention to terminate Billy's employment. She argued that severing ties was the only logical maneuver to prevent him from dragging Chancellor Industries into another one of his legendary, self-destructive vortexes. The thought of firing Billy offered Lily a glimmer of control, a definitive way to excise the chaos and restore order to her domain. She was entirely prepared to face the inevitable fallout, convinced that the short-term conflict of his dismissal would pale in comparison to the catastrophic damage he could inflict if allowed to continue his obsessive deep dive into the company's vulnerable past. Sensing the rapid deterioration of their romantic interlude, Kane immediately shifted into a posture of pacification, desperate to de-escalate Lily's rising panic and salvage the evening. He employed his most soothing, persuasive tone, attempting to systematically dismantle her fears with a heavy dose of dismissive logic. Kane argued vehemently against the drastic measure of firing Billy, suggesting that such an explosive reaction would only validate Billy's paranoia and potentially incite a public relations nightmare. Instead, Kane painted a picture of Billy as a tragic, ineffectual figure chasing phantoms. He leaned heavily on his own adversarial history with the Abbott heir, highlighting Billy's notorious lack of follow-through. Kane confidently assured Lily that Billy's current obsession was nothing more than a pointless, futile mission, a temporary distraction that would inevitably end in failure and frustration. Kane insisted that Jill Abbott was far too cunning and meticulous to leave any truly damaging secrets lying around for someone as erratic as Billy to discover. He urged Lily to practice patience, promising her that if they simply ignored the noise, Billy would eventually exhaust himself, hit a dead end, and quietly surrender his ridiculous quest. Kane's reassurances were designed to wrap Lily in a false sense of security, allowing them to return their focus to the rekindling of their own romance. For a brief, agonizingly deceptive moment, it appeared that Kane's pacifying words had found their mark. The tension in Lily's posture eased marginally, her rational mind warring with her protective instincts. The room settled into a fragile, heavy silence, the kind of stillness that precedes a devastating seismic event. They stood on the precipice of a decision, the romantic tension struggling to reassert itself against the backdrop of corporate anxiety. It was a tableau of precarious calm, a snapshot of two people entirely oblivious to the fact that the very foundation of their world was about to be violently ripped out from beneath them. The illusion of safety was shattered with the force of a physical blow as the heavy mahogany doors of the executive suite swung open. The interruption was not subtle. It was an aggressive, theatrical entrance that instantly sucked the air from the room. Billy Abbott crossed the threshold, completely obliterating the intimate atmosphere with an aura of overwhelming toxic triumph. His physical demeanor was entirely transformed. Gone was the restless, defensive energy that usually characterized his presence. In its place was an arrogant, swaggering confidence that radiated from his every pore. He moved with the terrifying certainty of a man who believed he had just conquered the world, his eyes gleaming with a manic, dangerous light. Billy did not merely enter the room, he invaded it, commanding the space with a theatricality that demanded absolute attention. He looked between Lily and Kane, his lips curling into a smug, predatory smile that conveyed a deep, unsettling satisfaction. The contrast between the fragile intimacy Lily and Kane had been trying to build and the explosive, chaotic energy Billy brought into the room was jarring. It was immediately apparent to both Lily and Kane that this was not the erratic, easily defeated Billy they had just been discussing. This was a man who had crossed a threshold, emerging with a weapon of mass destruction. Without preamble or hesitation, Billy launched into his grand declaration, his voice dripping with a terrifying blend of vindication and malice. He completely ignored the personal dynamic he had just interrupted, entirely consumed by the magnitude of his own revelation. Billy proudly announced that his relentless, obsessive search was officially over. He mocked their earlier doubts and their patronizing assumptions, reveling in the shock that was beginning to register on their faces. He spoke with the fervor of a zealot, declaring that he had not only uncovered Jill Abbott's deeply buried secrets, but had unearthed the ultimate prize. He dramatically proclaimed that he had found the absolute keys to the kingdom. The psychological weight behind Billy's words was staggering. He was not just speaking as a corporate executive, he was speaking as the marginalized son, the perennial disappointment who had finally found the ultimate validation. He believed that the historical evidence he possessed was not just a legal loophole, but a divine right of succession. Billy was fueled by the ghosts of his family's past, driven by a desperate need to elevate the Abbott name and punish those who had ever doubted his capability. His arrogance was a deeply ingrained belief that he was about to correct decades of historical injustice and claim his rightful place at the absolute pinnacle of Genoa City's corporate hierarchy. As the sheer magnitude of Billy's preamble settled over the room, he delivered the final, devastating blow. With unwavering eye contact and a voice cold enough to freeze blood, Billy explicitly declared that Chancellor Industries belonged entirely to him and the Abbott family. He did not present it as a theory, a negotiation, or a possibility. He presented it as an absolute, undeniable fact. He aggressively asserted that he possessed the irrefutable proof required to back up his staggering claim, effectively stripping Jill, Kane, and Lily of their perceived authority in a single, breathtaking moment. The declaration was a declaration of absolute war, initiated not in a boardroom, but in the intimate space of their executive suite. The reaction from Lily was instantaneous and profound. The shock paralyzed her, draining the color from her face as the full, catastrophic implications of Billy's words crashed over her. The woman who had just been contemplating firing an erratic employee was now staring at a man who claimed to own the very ground she stood upon. Her protective instincts morphed into a deep, existential dread, realizing that the corporate chaos she had feared was not just a possibility, but an incoming tsunami. The legacy she had sworn to protect was suddenly under siege from an enemy armed with historical ghosts and legal dynamite, leaving her reeling from the sheer audacity of his claim. Kane's reaction was equally visceral, his earlier arrogance and dismissive confidence crumbling to ash in an instant. The man he had just written off as a harmless, easily distracted nuisance had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the center of their lives. Kane's mind raced, desperately trying to calculate the validity of Billy's claims, while simultaneously confronting the terrifying realization that his own hidden agendas and secrets were now in imminent danger of exposure. The soothing pacifier was gone, replaced by a man staring down the barrel of a devastating legal and corporate bloodbath, realizing far too late that underestimating Billy Abbott was a dangerous mistake. The room remained suspended in a suffocating, electrifying silence as the three figures stood locked in a momentous standoff. Billy stood tall, a monument to vindictive triumph, soaking in the horror and disbelief radiating from his adversaries. The romantic tension that had filled the room mere minutes ago was entirely eradicated, replaced by the cold, brutal reality of an impending war. This was no longer a simple dispute over corporate strategy or employee behavior. It was a battle for the very soul of Chancellor Industries. As Billy's triumphant smirk deepened, the silence screamed with the promise of relentless conflict, shattered loyalties, and a devastating fight for survival that would inevitably tear their world apart.